But now roughly 25% of all 340B purchases are going through contract pharmacy. So this allowed the market to expand far beyond the traditional safety net to essentially encompass a whole bunch of the market. And this is where we get to a very important part of the story, which I don't think people fully appreciate, which is that the payers are starting to notice what's happening. Some people have characterized everything that I've discussed as a battle between hospitals and manufacturers. But that's not what's really going on here, because money is fungible. Money doesn't know where it comes from. And what's happening is when a prescription, after the fact, becomes a 340B prescription, the employers and payers are the ones who are losing out. And here's an example. And this is, I gave a similar example a few years ago in a webinar, and this is a little more kind of an update of that. But just consider, for your consideration, a specialty script valued at about a $5,000 reimbursement. And for that, the manufacturer provides a 30% rebate. The patient pays a 25% coinsurance, and the rest of the cost is absorbed by the plan sponsor, the payer. I'm excluding a lot of fees. This is a sort of super simplified example to highlight what's going on. If that script is then claimed as a 340B script, the rebate vanishes. Again, assuming that the PBM knows it and discloses it to the manufacturer will say, well, okay, we don't own a rebate on it anymore. We already gave a 340B discount on this, so no rebate. So the payer's cost, essentially the discount they were getting on the price via the after-the-fact rebate, vanishes. The patient is still paying the same coinsurance. They might have paid it months ago, but now the payer's costs has increased quite a bit. And where does that $5,000 go? Well, using some pretty conservative assumptions, here's a way to think about it. The 340B acquisition cost, which I've just set at 40% to keep the math simple, that's essentially what the manufacturer now gets for that product. The contract pharmacy fee and the third-party administration fee, in this example, equal about a little more than $1,000. So that's roughly a fifth. And there's some footnotes there to say where I got those numbers from. I didn't just make them up. And then the 340B covered entity now collects $1,930. So the plan is now paying a lot for that, more than they expected in their benefits for that prescription, and the covered entity is now getting it. And one of the things that's interesting about this is that if you talk to employers or health plans, they will often point the finger at hospitals as being a source of high cost. And now, on top of the normal cost they're paying for hospital services, they're now also paying this additional 340B tariff. And how do we know this is happening? Well, we have almost no visibility into what's going on with 340B, but a number of states, Minnesota in the lead, have started to ask covered entities to provide some data about where the money is going. And we reran that post today, written by my colleague Bryce Platt, on the blog. And the Minnesota Transparency Report, which to the best of my knowledge is the only one out there, just one state, that's all we know. In the state of Minnesota, the hospitals in particular earned $1.3 billion from the 340B program. And the payer behind that, in almost half of the situation, was a commercial payer, an employer or a health plan, and in another 40% was Medicare. So essentially 80% of all the dollars were coming from commercial plans and Medicare, which means that's where the money was coming from, which means this is actually probably widespread. And so what is happening is that one of the things driving benefit costs has been 340B contract pharmacy. And payers are just starting to wake up to this. One estimate suggests, linked in the bottom there, that payers have lost $6 billion in rebates last year because of 340B contract pharmacy alone. That also feeds into higher premiums, because we know from evidence after evidence that the majority of rebates are used to lower premiums, both the ones the employer pays and the ones the patient contributes to. Rebates are generally not used to lower the cost of a prescription for the patient whose prescription generated that rebate. So what's happening now is fewer rebates, which means costs go up, and an impact on premiums. So this is all happening behind the scenes for a program that's growing 22% per year. So when we talk about healthcare costs, this is like one of these like fourth dimensional chess things that's occurring in the background. And people don't fully grasp it, but a number of employers are starting to grasp it, and we've been seeing congressional testimony about this issue. So they're starting to realize this could be a problem for us and asking for transparency into where the money is going. The other thing that's happening is some enterprising entrepreneurs have figured out that, well, if the hospital is making all this money, maybe they would accept lower reimbursement, and I can give some of the savings to the employer, to a for-profit company. There's a great expose done by the Wall Street Journal, linked below, non-paywall link, gift link, so you can check it out yourself. Basically, how there's a number of companies who have set up arrangements where they can get patients 340B pricing or a discount from the regular pricing by sharing the savings with 340B and a private company. And I can't probably say who it is, but there's a very, very well-known company led by a very prominent individual who has a division which is using this exact system. And if people knew that, they would probably say, that's not the safety net, but that's where the money is going. So again, it's one of those kind of complexities in there. And I would argue that this entire dynamic is one more factor that is driving toward the net pricing drug channel. Hashtag NPDC. Now remember, I've talked about the net pricing drug channel in the Outlook and in the PBM webinar a couple months ago, written about it on the blog. But essentially, there's a number of factors: the uncapping of Medicaid rebates, the Inflation Reduction Act, most favored nation, high deductible plans, cash pay pharmacies, other factors that are driving toward a system where maybe the gross to net bubble is deflating. We've seen list price decreases for some products. And add 340B contract pharmacy to that list, because if you are actually paying a net price, then you're not really at risk of this rebate getting moved from your pocket, the employer, to the hospital's pocket. Instead, you're like, well, there is no rebate to grab. And so that is another factor that is sort of, to me, going to accelerate over the next few coming years, the net pricing drug channel. It's leading to some disjunctions in the 340B market. I'll give you a very specific example.